What's up? How are we doing? How are we doing? Again, I need like a stream starting. Want time for people to get up, get on, and so we'll just chat for a little bit. Maybe I should have some topics just to chat about loosely before we get into the news. I could just stare into the camera. Not sure that's a good idea. All right. Oh, kind of ready for this next week. Kind of ready. I think a couple things are going to fall in place with a couple pieces of the software we're writing on stream. I'm excited about that. I'm actually kind of excited because some of the things we've talked about are things that I've wanted to kind of make videos on, so it might just help me make videos on those. So, yeah. Anyhow, I will start to get started. I will start with the news. Hopefully, people have had time to join. I know that there was some time changes, and I don't know if the EU's time change happened this week or this was their last week of having a different time. I'm not entirely sure, but we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so probably the biggest deal that happened was on March 20th. Pretty much all software development stopped for it was like 9 a.m. in the morning to 10 p.m. Yeah, yeah. So as we can see here, ChatGPT was down. I don't know if anyone was able to get work done last week on the 20th. I found it extremely difficult to do any amount of work at all. ChatGPT was gone. So, thankfully, they finally did get that fixed, but it took pretty much all day. Like I said, 9:30 in the morning to 10 o'clock. That was. I feel bad for the engineers on this. This was a long day because here when they marked it resolved, they were still monitoring this. All right, but best news is that's not it. That's not it. We're gonna start here with security. That was mostly for fun. Let people join. But we're gonna jump into some security. Hello, Russell. How are you doing? It's good to see you. We're going to jump into security. We actually have a couple pertinent things that I think might affect you. And the first one is GitHub has given us a new word. You can GitHub yourself. That's the new word. I've done it several times on stream. So thankfully it's not called American yourself. But GitHub has accidentally leaked their key, their SSH RSA key. So basically what this means is if you use SSH, which, I know that I do. Now, I do use the ED25519 keys, so this didn't actually affect me. It's only if you use the RSA SSH key. But if you do, you need to reject your known hosts, at least for GitHub. For GitHub.com, you need to reject your known hosts. I did it anyways, even though I don't use the RSA SSH key. I rejected it anyways because I was just being extra careful. But anyways, I do think this affects a lot of people, so I did talk a little bit about it yesterday on stream, just because getting it out there as soon as possible is pretty good, and I should post it on Discord when things like this come up. So anyways, if that's you, they do have instructions here, so I'm going to post this. If you don't know how to update your known hosts, please go do it. They have instructions on how to do it, it's basically just this, though. Or you can just delete your known host. resets everything. All right, cool beans. I do love I don't know if they updated it. The one that I saw initially didn't have. We discovered that private key was briefly exposed on a public GitHub repository. I didn't remember seeing that because up here they don't actually talk about why they did it. They just say like, "Hey, we made this change. We've updated our SSH key." But the fact is that they just published it to a public repository. That's always a good way to do it. Moving on in security, another thing that I saw was this. So the goose is loose. Now, this is a tool released by the CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure portion of our government. But if you're working on Azure, this tool looks very interesting. I haven't used it, but it's released under the CCO license. And it's a tool for looking for anomalies in Azure. So it's specifically for Azure. So that's all that it can do. But if you're running on Azure, I would give it a check. I think I say I'd give it a check. I don't know what that means. Like I'm paying it money, but I would give it a look. See if it might be helpful to you guys. So I thought I would post this. Again, I don't run a ton of stuff in Azure, so I'm not an expert on this, but yeah. Let me also post that in chat. And then the last-ish thing, actually I have two things. The last-ish thing was this. There was 55 zero-day flaws exploited last year. And if you don't know what a zero-day is, basically a zero-day is it's a vulnerability we had no risk of or no knowledge of. You know, they were 0 day. And so 55 of these were exploited last year. And I think this article is actually really good because it goes into making sure that you have the importance of security risk management. And I think least privilege, that type of thing is one of these risk management mitigations. Everything that you do, and this is why I say like it's not the end of the world if a company gets hacked. It's how they handle it and what were they doing to mitigate that getting hacked. This is why even when you have two services, microservices that communicate together, you use TLS communication, you use MTLS. And the reason is that helps mitigate. If somebody does get on your network, they can't necessarily snoop on the packets between those two things. Again, I think this is a good, like, you don't even have to read the article. It's just about this. It's why the defense in layers is so important. Because you can get hacked. These are 0 days. It's not like there was a CVE that was out there that you ignored. The CVE didn't exist until you got hacked by that technique. That's the problem. This is the last thing on security. I find this kind of upsetting. Okta is one of the biggest providers of login, and I found this was kind of terrifying. So what's happening is Okta is storing in plain text failed logins, and that includes if the person accidentally 55 0-day exploits that were known about. That's actually a really good point. How many do we still not know about? How many are actively ongoing right now that we don't know about? I think that's what Russell's point is. We know of 55 that were exploited that were 0 days. There could be a lot more exploited ones that we don't know about yet. That's going to be in 2023's list or 2024's or whatever. I think that's a good point. And again, like, this is why, I know that there's some developers who are like, oh, I don't want to be a security expert, but you need to understand security at a base level, or should. and why it's important, especially if you're on a small team. I know that some teams like Google or whatnot have big teams that handle a lot of these defense and layers and stuff, and you might not even know that you're using MTLS if you're using Istio that was configured by your security team to artificially inject these things. Like, but in the end, not all of us work in those large companies that have, too many people for multiple reasons and whatnot. Nice, Russell. It's awesome that you've been joining. So I super appreciate it. So what is kind of horrifying about this is researchers found that Okta was storing these failed login attempts in plain text, and one of the things that happens with these is people accidentally type their password in the username, and so it's like actually their valid password. And so this is pretty bad because if an attacker gets their hands on this, they can actually just flip it around. I mean, getting a username is not difficult, but they can get their password from it, which is pretty bad. So I'm looking. So far, it hasn't been fixed, but I think Okta will. This is kind of alarmingly bad for a company that should be very big into security. But yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say, I guess for me, there's like, if you're like Cloudflare or Okta or another security-based company, I feel like there's more and more precedence that these little things shouldn't slip through. Like if this happened in the Null Cloud, I'd be like, yeah, my bad. I was trying. I was actually thinking about that, Russell. I don't know that you've watched the last 3 consecutive streams, but you of anybody deserve it. So I'm happy that it gave it to you. Well, you know what? I don't know that anybody watched the last 2 streams that I did. So maybe it's consecutive people because you would be the consecutive person. So I appreciate it. Did you guys see anything else in security? Feel free to bring links yourself and post them. I'll be moving on to the cloud news now. I did want to bring in one major point. I've been asking some people in the industry, and we're going to do it. I'm going to get some stuff around it. So it's going to take a little bit of time because I want a place for people to ask questions where we can collect them and answer them. I'm also wanting to get people time slots. Like if you want to have a 5-minute slot to come in and ask your question about some career advice with a panel of people, we're going to do that. And yeah, that way you also get a panel of people that have had a lot of experience. So you're not just getting my perspective. I think that's what I hate the most about giving people my perspective is sometimes I feel like, well, yes, that worked for me. That's where it worked in the companies that I work for, but that's not true of all companies. And so I'm trying to get a little bit wider of a net of people that have worked at multiple different companies, everywhere from Google to open source companies like SUSE to small little startups. So yeah, so I've gotten quite a few people that have agreed to do that, and I'll be sharing more in the coming weeks. We'll probably shoot to do it once a month, and we'll see how it goes. We'll do it like right after the news segment, or maybe we won't do the news segment. We'll figure it out. I'm figuring out the details right now, but I wanted to let you know also that we can get some people because I think it would be really great if we got a lot of questions. Next week, I'll have a place for you to email, so you can email your questions that you'd like career advice in, or a place where you can schedule when we get a schedule up and running. All right, let's jump into Azure. I feel like I haven't done Azure first for a long time, so I'm doing Azure first this time. these are the things that stood out to me. Let me know, post a link if you saw something else that happened in Azure that I missed. Obviously, last week we did cover that they have a new ChatGPT integration, so you can get billed for ChatGPT directly through Azure, basically. So that's kind of nice if you're building an application for chat that leverages the ChatGPT runtime. But this week, I saw this Docker container runtime requirement for Windows node pools effective May 1st. This seemed a little bit weird to me, the statement, like the Docker container runtime requirement. But if you read in, it makes a little bit more sense. The Docker container runtime will be retired for Windows node pools on May 1st, 2023. After Docker container runtime is retired, you may remain on existing deployed instances, but scaling operations will fail. Node pool creation will fail, and you will be out of support. So that makes a little bit more sense. So, anyways, if you were using Docker Container Runtime, it's getting retired for Windows, and that is coming up really soon. So, AKS will stop support for Windows Server 2019 on March. This is again just more along the same lines. If you guys are using AKS and Windows, I don't use them very often. I know that a couple people that follow do use Windows with pods, with Kubernetes. So if that's you, be warned. Generally available Azure Private Link support for inbound traffic in Azure API management. I think this is actually a pretty big deal. Private Link is one of the effective ways of doing a multi-cloud or it actually has a lot of uses, and one of the things that has kind of been lacking for a little while, it's a way to do multi-cloud, it's a way to do hybrid cloud, and it's a way to give a private API. These are all things that you can do with a good private link. Now, again, I haven't actually used Azure that much with their private link, so there's that. But it is nice to see a maturing private link. Azure okay, so this one isn't about Azure Maps being HIPAA compliant. It's more about if you are in HIPAA or one of these restricted things. It's not all of Azure or all of AWS. This is true of all of them. It is specific product offerings that are HIPAA or any of these other compliances. So it's actually very important that if you are in one of these highly regulated industries, that you actually get, they have, you can ask for, I forget what the document is. You can ask for the document that lists it and that provides your compliance for the service. And it's very important to understand which services you can use that are compliant. Now we're going to move on. No. It does not mean that Windows is giving up on running containers. What this is Windows Server 2019 is going away. Their Windows Server 2022. So this is more about migrating onto Windows Server 2022. And this is the Docker Container Runtime. Okay, so I believe what this is going is you know how there's all the Docker shim? My understanding is this is them removing the Docker shim. You can still do containers, but it's not through Docker. And so you have to do the migration through it. I'll drop this link so you can read more on it, but let me dig into it and make sure that my understanding is right. Let's see. Yeah. See, upgrade to container. So again, it's just updating to container, not Docker specific, which it's probably using containerd. So still basically Docker, just not using the Docker shim. It's going to affect dozens of people worldwide. I wonder, so like, I actually wonder how many people. So I know a couple people on my Kubernetes release notes have mentioned that they use Windows containers. Do a lot of people use Windows containers? I would have expected, again, dozens, mostly Microsoft. You know what I assume? I know that the Xbox game service is run on Windows, and I know it's run on Kubernetes. I'm assuming it's Kubernetes Windows pods. I'm assuming. That's my only assumption. But I can't get a good grasp on how many people actually run Windows containers. Yeah, other than Microsoft. Now, that being said, in Kubernetes 126, they actually put a lot of work into Kubernetes to support Windows containers. I did make a brief mention of those in my release notes as I went through. I didn't dig into them because I don't know them very well, but there was actually quite a bit of work. And I'm assuming that work was sponsored by Microsoft. So again, I don't know. All right, let's go on to Azure. Azure had some pretty no, they had nothing. They literally had nothing. We talked about these last week. The clean rooms was a couple weeks ago. The Amazon Linux, we talked about that last week. And the Mount Point, which I do find very interesting, we also talked about last week. So AWS, which is usually my stronghold of good news, was absolutely boring. Nothing interesting. Now, Google, on the other hand, did come out with a cloud industry first. So let's talk about that. Introducing G2 VMs with NVIDIA L4 GPUs. Now, just because it's a industry first doesn't mean that it's necessarily good. The Null Cloud has actually had a claim to industry first. If you guys notice, it was down for an entire week, completely down. That is an industry first. It doesn't mean it's necessarily that good of an industry first. Is there an AWS event coming? I don't know that there is. There could be one that's coming up. It's not a big one for reInvent or things like that. But they definitely do hold some. So it definitely could be that AWS is releasing holding some, because they do that. Absolutely, they do that. All right. So today, GCP is introducing the G2, the newest addition to the Google Compute GPU family in Google Cloud. It's the industry-versed VM powered by the newly announced NVIDIA L4 Tensor Core GPU. Industry first. All right. I do actually think these are good. I was teasing them a little bit, but supposedly the L4 Tensor Core GPUs from NVIDIA are amazing. I'm not rich enough to actually try one of these. They're expensive as garbage, but supposedly they're really good. I think that Google has put a lot into empowering your AI. So if you had to ask me the difference between Google's AI path and AWS's. AWS seems more like, hey, we'll train the things for you and make general purpose ones that you can use. That seems like I want to say SageMaker is really the path that they went down. Hey, you can give me an image and I can tell you what's in the image, and it's pretty nice with that. Whereas I feel like Google's approach to AI is, hey, we'll give you the tools and things to do it yourself. We'll give you things like Kubeflow to run on your cluster to actually train your own models and things like that. I feel like they're slightly, and don't get me wrong, AWS does some of the same stuff as well. It's not just their own boxed solutions, but and GCP has some of their own boxed solutions. It just seems like their focus is a little different. AWS has a lot of AI services. Now, AWS does not provide Open API, if that's what you're asking, but AWS has a lot of their own. Let me just pull it up for you. So their SageMaker is the one that comes to mind. I don't know why that went away. Okay, so yeah, let's see. SageMaker is the one that I'm thinking of. Okay, yeah. So we have SageMaker, which is build, train, and deploy models. Which kind of works on that, but it's not open source like Kubeflow and some of those things. And then we have these things that are like those pre-boxed things that they work really hard. They have a lot of actually really nice pre-boxed things that you can use that just like Amazon Lex. You can build voice and text chatbots using Amazon Lex. You don't have to train a model. You can just use it. They have a lot of these. I forget the one with pictures, but it actually works pretty well. Oh, yeah, it's the recognition. You can give it images and videos, and it will tell you every object that it finds in it and the coordinates of those objects and things like that. Pretty nice, as well as like the certainty it is. Again, this is a little bit of the difference between those two clouds from my perspective, whereas GCP has really powered you to train your own with open source tools. And they don't have as many pre-canned things, although they're working on it. They're working on it. They have some. Anyways, these instances look really cool. They're just really expensive, like really expensive. AppLovin is filthy rich because they're using these. I believe one of these costs about as much as I make per month. So, yep. I don't actually know how much they cost because it wouldn't tell me how much they cost, but I can tell you from how much their other ones cost, and these are going to be more expensive. They'll cost a lot. All right, Kubernetes K8s GCR IO redirect. What you need to know as an Anthos or GKE user. Now, this has been something that has been going on. I'm posting the link so you can read it if you need to. In November, the open source Kubernetes project announced its new image registry. Now, if you watched my release notes, if you watched them, go watch them, you would know this. And it went officially GA. The registry would replace the legacy K8 GCR IO registry with the to assist with this transition and ensure that the users of earlier Kubernetes releases and tooling can be updated to support the new version of time, the Kubernetes project in partnership with Google has gradually started redirecting image requests from here. So basically what's happening is they said, hey, we'll help you, GCP did, and we'll redirect people there. And this just goes into a little bit more of why this is happening. The redirect is a temporary measure, which means you shouldn't just be relying on the redirect. The redirect is there to make it less painful, but you should be switching to the new one. That's why Kubernetes has a big billboard that says, hey, you should be switching and whatnot. So yeah, I'm glad that they made this. They go into some more detail. And they actually go into what type of errors will I see if I'm impacted. Of course, it's image pool errors because you can't pull the images from a registry they don't exist in anymore. So yeah, pretty standard stuff, but good to know if you didn't realize it was happening. And that was pretty much it. They haven't. That was not much else. And that was pretty much it for cloud news. Did you guys see anything else in the cloud news that happened? I didn't see anything from the smaller vendors that was of any real substance. So yeah, that's it. But that's not it for this stream, though. That's just the start. Actually, that's like maybe 2/3 of it. We have some articles to go over. You know what? I missed something in Azure. It was in the wrong place, so we're going to cover that first before going over the other things. And then we're going to talk about some of these blogs that I read. There's at least 2 things that are interesting. We have a new education site for people trying to get into software engineering. I'm gonna at least take a few of the classes to see how good it is because I can't give a recommendation right now. It just literally launched, so I'm kind of excited about that. And then there's 2 open source projects that one was shown to me earlier this week, and the other one was one that I found that looks interesting. Wanted to share it. All right. So the first thing that I missed, and I'm sorry this happened to hit the Europeans the hardest, probably only, but Azure Resource Manager was down for a couple of hours in Europe. So if you used Azure Resource Manager in Europe, this hurt. This hurt. Yep. But let's move on to some things. There's actually a thing that I didn't have here on Docker. So Docker actually has two things. First, there was a whole kerfuffle around Docker and Docker removing free teams, and they have walked back. They're not doing that. They did a really bad job removing the free team tier, anyways, and then it just got even worse. And they're just not doing it anymore. They've just decided not to do that. Free teams are there for good now. So I'll continue to watch that. But the other thing that looked interesting, and as you guys know, I like Wasm. I haven't used Wasm a ton, but Docker Wasm is interesting because it runs Wasm apps using the Docker image, which just basically means you can run Docker containers, you can run OCI containers and Wasm apps using the same CLI, which seems kind of nice if I've ever made a Wasm container or app. So anyways, it's in Technical Preview 2. The first time we announced it, it was Technical Preview 1. Now it's in Technical Preview 2. There are some changes to note here. If you were trying this is something we will probably try on stream sooner than later, probably, but yeah, we'll see. Actually, would the Twitch bot be a good Wasm app? Maybe. Probably not. Probably not. Anyways, go check it out if you're wanting to. Give it a check, as I commonly say. Oh, I did not know that. That is, let me bring that up really quickly. I didn't see that. Well, that's kind of sad. I guess Gordon Moore died this Friday. So 2 days ago. Moore has I was gonna say he's a person everybody knows his last name. He stepped down for in 2006. Okay. 94 is a good age. I mean 94 is a good age. So yeah. This is Intel's post. I'm gonna post this here for y'all if you want to read up on Gordon on Moore's impact on the world. All right. Well, thanks for bringing up the news because I had completely missed this, and I do believe that, you know, he's also not a person. I don't feel like there's a lot of controversial things about it. You know, it's like Steve Jobs, who, whether you like him or not, was also just not a nice person. Whereas I have never heard anything bad about Moore, about him being a jerk or anything. I don't really know. He could have been. I generally think like big industry people are probably, but I've never heard anything bad about him. So let's move on to something a little bit more horrifying. OpenAI's CEO wants to scan your eyes to replace passwords. I think this is horrifying. I actually don't like biometric information because as of right now, biometric information isn't protected. Like your fingerprints aren't protected. So like I do believe that at least in the United States, if the police want to take your fingerprint, they can, which means if you unlock your phone with your fingerprint, they can. Whereas they can't force you to tell your password. So I don't actually like biometric data used on those things, but you know, to each their own. If you want your retina scanned, go for it. I also worry about the effect. Are we going to have a lot of blind people in 20 years? Also, who would I actually have a good that's a fantastic point. When you start out as a nonprofit and then decide to change to profit, it shows where you stand. You know, most people who start a nonprofit want to do it to make a difference, want to make a change, want to help something. Like that's their goal. And when you go and then make that change, it's like, oh, you got a lot of money because you were a nonprofit. Then you came across something that you realized you could make a lot of money for. And instead of trying to change the world for better, you decide to make a lot of money off of it. I would be furious if I had given $100 million to a company that was nonprofit and then they decided to become for profit. I would be furious. So I agree that you probably can't trust them. And that alone makes me not want to use Open API or Open AI for even my Twitch bot. I'm probably going to find a replacement eventually. Talking about that, Google did release their own chatbot. And Bard, if you ask it, will tell you that it was trained using Gmail data, which is also horrifying. Google has refuted this. That Google said it's not true. So funny part here was Google was caught between a rock and a hard place. They either had to say that Bard was wrong, or that they committed a heinous act. They decided to point fingers at Bard being wrong because we already know from their advertisement that Bard's wrong. Their advertisement was all about how Bard is wrong, and yeah, now they're stuck. Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing. It makes me happy. They to defend themselves, they basically had to be like, Bard's wrong, just Bard's wrong. I don't know if it's just me. Everybody keeps saying that AI is taking over the world, but from what I see of it, it's going to make us even less accurate. The terms and conditions of Gmail do say something, but it's much more limiting. It doesn't give them permission to train their machines off of it. It's something like they can't store the data, which I believe they would have to for machine learning, and that they are only doing a keyword search over it, basically. They're looking for keywords. I don't believe that they could. But even if they could, does it mean that they should? I wasn't necessarily... I said heinous act. I didn't say crime. I didn't say that they were breaking their terms of condition. I'm not sure whether they would or not. I think that they would get a ton of flack, though. I think that they would lose a lot of customers. Each word could be a keyword, sure. Like I said, I'm not talking from a legal standpoint. Yeah. Anyways, let's talk about if you're trying to get into computer science. One, there's going to be a fantastic panel of people that you can ask for advice in the near future. But if you're not wanting to wait till then and you're actually trying to just learn, I found a cool thing from the Raspberry Pi Foundation that was just released. Now, again, I haven't tried it. I can't tell you exactly, but it's been released. The Ada Computer Science, the new online learning platform for teachers, students, and anyone interested in learning about computer science. So the new Ada platform is out. I'm going to leave a link if that's somebody you know. I don't know. But it's out there. Again, it's cool to see people putting this type of stuff out. Last thing, not really a tech thing that happened, but something that I think yes, I have to store it for you to read. Again, I don't know that it's against their terms of service. Not what I was saying, but I do think that they would suffer quite a bit of flack. I already don't like using Gmail anyways, so I would recommend you don't use it if you can avoid it. But, if you need a free email, it's a good free email. Hashtag believe Bard. We should start that on Twitter. Hashtag believe Bard. All right. This is something that I think is important for all leaders. And I think the tech industry does a bad job of it. And I think this is how I try to lead in the tech industry. And so I wanted to call attention to it because I don't know anything about this CEO other than this. So again, I don't know that they're a great CEO or that they do all the greatest things. I'm only talking about this specific thing. But Starbucks CEO says he'll work a shift at the company's cafe once a month. And I honestly think this is fantastic. I'm a big believer in servant leadership. If you're in leadership, you're there actually to make everybody else's life better. And one of the only ways you can do that is to do the things that you ask your people to do. You could never know or help them if you didn't know what their struggles were. And yes, part of that's asking them and listening to them. But another part of that is actually doing the things so you can understand what they're saying. So I think this mentality is important. Like I said, I am not talking about I don't know anything about Starbucks CEO, honestly. Honestly, I've never read a thing about him except for this. I'm not defending anything that they do. I don't know anything about them. I'm merely talking about that. That's it. And I like that. And I think that's important for people. I also hate unions. I know that's not popular, but I don't like American unions. Let me reiterate. I think some unions are very needed and good. I have disliked classical American unions. I don't know. I could be wrong. Fine, my bad. I rescind that. You as a CEO shouldn't understand your employees. You shouldn't take the initiative to understand them better, do the same work that they do, and put yourself in their shoes. I take it back. Let's move on. Two things. It's a new Rust tool that I found, but I know that feature flag can be difficult, and a lot of teams struggle with it. This is a new open source solution for it. A paid solution would be something like Launch Darkly, which is really nice. A service I have used. But Flipped, that's at least what I'm calling it, Flipped, is a new open source project that lets you do feature flags. Feature flags, I think, are really, really important, especially when you're talking about continuous delivery of web services. And I say new. It's been around for a little while. I just learned of it. So I'm excited to maybe play around with this. Maybe this is how I'll do feature flags for the Null Cloud. I'm looking into it. I saw this. I thought that it was pretty, and it's in Go. I'm sorry, it's in Go. It's not in Rust. The other project's in Rust. This one's in Go. Anyways, it's a pretty cool project. And so yeah. Anyways, if you haven't done feature flags or are looking into it or looking to move it off of a service, this is I don't know. I just started to look into it. So I just started to evaluate it. I found it. There are a couple other feature flag projects out there that we can. You know what? Next week I'm gonna go over all the open source feature flag ones. The other one that I do know of is kind of big and bloated. But let's do this. Next Sunday, we'll go over at the end of the stream a bunch of feature flag projects, and I'll actually have some reviews. I've used 2 of them in the past. I'll dig into some of these. So if you're managing 3 feature flags, just use a config file. I agree with that. I think at the beginning, if you're using Kubernetes, you can do it fairly easily before you get into something like this with something like a config file. Now, what a tool like this brings is a couple of things, but they also allow for dynamic flag management. And what I mean by that is something like, hey, customer A wants to be on beta features, which is an opt-in. They can opt in and then get access to those things, which can't really be done by config easily. You could do it in their database, but it's generally, that's the point where I say stop doing it in like a config map and start migrating to an actual feature flag solution. Especially because it can give you a high level overview and it gets messy to start doing it. But yes, I agree with you, Russell. If you're talking about 3 feature flags that use a config file, there's no reason to have an entire thing, especially if it's just environment. If the only difference is like, hey, I want to do, dev stuff in dev, like all the latest things, and then it only gets into production when it's production ready, you can 100% do those in just config files, and you don't need anything else. 100%. But feature flag can be done. There can be a lot of other stuff that goes into it. This was another one. I believe, actually, Russell, you're the one that put me onto this. It looks kind of interesting. I haven't used it. If you guys are in Rust and you're looking for a tiny framework that's blazingly fast, that's kind of like React Native, here's one for you that's in Rust instead of JavaScript. So this is pretty cool. I think I'm actually going to be trying to use it. So it has all the check marks in all the boxes, so it's a win. It's a win on this one. It's a lin on this one, and it's a mac on this one. But mostly we're worried. We're really worried about the lins, not the wins. All right. Well, that's it for me today. Remember, if you're a CEO, don't try to understand your employees. That's what we learned today. Don't try to put yourself in their shoes. Don't be a servant leader. You're the man on top, or woman, or whatever. You're on top. Do as I say, not as I do. So, with that, I will leave you guys for the week. I will see you guys Tuesday. Use Darwin. Darwin. I was like, why would they use Darwin? Darwin. Yes. If they use Darwin, they would have a win loss. WLD. No. It's good. I got it. I have first read Darwin and I was like, oh. But yeah, Darwin. They should have used Darwin. I think you're right. They should have definitely put Darwin here instead of Mac. That was a loss on their part. That was a loss. really, I do think this is like win, neutral, lose. I feel like that's my perspective on this. It's win, neutral, lose. Like the further right you get, the worse. Smaller is better. It would have given me pleasure to see like 3 missing features from the Mac support. Man, I'm so biased. Mac gives me heartaches every single time I try to use it. It really does. All right. Well, thank you. I will see you guys next weekend, or if you are in America's time zones, I do stream on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I think we'll get a lot of progress done. I have good plans for both Assembly Line and the Twitch bot. We've kind of been working out and fiddling with stuff. I think we're going to get to the actually doing stuff instead of just figuring stuff out. So I'm excited about that. With that being said, I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend and a good start to your week next week. I don't drink Starbucks. I make my own coffee. I literally stated I know nothing about this person. I just wanted to point out something I think more of our leaders should do. That's all I said. I literally prefaced it with, I know nothing else about this person. I know nothing. I wanted to point out something I think is a good thing to do. Even as a place of leadership, I think that, your directors and architects and, vice presidents should be on call for the apps that their teams make. I really do. Even of your big companies. I think they should be on call. 100%. I'm not saying that they should be the most knowledgeable person on their thing, but when their team has a bug that they need to deal with, they should be right there with them. I have always done that. That is living the life of a servant leader, and I think it's an important thing for us to do. But yeah, I think a CEO should get a call at 3 a.m. 100%. I'm not saying that they have to be on call every 2 weeks. That's not my point. Like, obviously, you have other things to do, but you should understand what that system is, how it works, and the pains that people have with it, and how your on call works. Maybe not a CEO, but if you're in technical leadership, I 100% think you do. No pressure to the rest of it. You shouldn't have a hierarchical structure where there is pressure for that. If I was ever CEO, I would never want people to feel that way. I probably will never be a CEO because of that, but I think like that mentality, I actually see leadership as everybody says crap rolls downhill. And I actually agree with this. I actually agree that crap rolls downhill. But what I don't think people understand is that this is the hill that we're looking at. This is the hill. Let's look at it. Let's look at our hill here. So our hill looks like this. All right. And your CEO, where's the text button? Here it is. This is how crap should flow. Downhill. Not both ways. Let's remove one of those arrows. Remove the wrong arrow. Let's remove the other arrow. This is the flow of crap, or should be. So, you have your middle management in here. And you know what? For the companies that are trying to get away from middle management, let me tell you, I think middle management is super important. I think this is really important because the CEO wants to set the big picture. They want to set where the ship is going. They don't want to know how the engines work. They don't want to know how those things necessarily happen. And they don't want to know how to direct the teams to do those things. You want an effective group of people that know how to direct the team. They want to say this is where it goes. Now, I do think that they need to be involved in this entire process, but the crap should flow downhill. Yeah, this is what I'm saying. Like, for the companies of over 50 people with no, if you're saying that you have even 100 people and have no middle management, okay, great. I don't care. That's fine. But if you're talking about companies over that, this is, now you have to have effective middle managers. If you don't have effective middle managers, I get it. Get rid of them. They're useless. But the effective middle management is where the actual people management goes, and it's maybe even underrated in my opinion. I think the most highly of these people up here, these are the people that are getting crap done. Getting crap done. The job of middle management is to make sure that the people that are getting crap done don't have any blockers, have what they need, and feel secure in their job, and that what they're doing is useful. The other job is to understand where the CEO wants to go and how to get them there, and to execute on that vision. And that means effectively keeping the CEO from bothering the teams and focusing the teams, and then helping the teams. And this is why I think servant leadership is so important, is because there's no better way of knowing how the team operates and works than actually operating and working with them and not being afraid to get your hands dirty. Yeah, those companies removing middle management probably have no career frameworks or room for growth. They're also going to have less effective people, because really my job as middle management is to make people more effective. That's what it is. It's to make sure that they're more effective and help them understand the direction that they're going. So, I always think of it as in terms of a ship. The ship's captain says, hey, we're going to XYZ coordinates. And then you have a radar team that's looking for obstacles, and you have these. And middle management is making sure that the teams understand their goals, their responsibilities, and making sure that they don't have any roadblocks. So, like, the people in charge of steering the rudder know which way they're supposed to turn the rudder and what they're supposed to be, how fast and whatnot. But you have to communicate that with the engine team that's going to also change the directions of the engine. There's so much that goes into it, and this is why an effective middle management is going to empower the people that get crap done, the most important people, the people at the top of the food chain. The CEO should be at the bottom of this food chain. That's what I think. Maybe I'm not popular, but anyways, crap should roll downhill. 100%. This is what the hill should look like. That's my rant for the day. And yeah, I do think sometimes companies get too heavy on middle management. I think sometimes stuff like that happens. I also think that middle management isn't effective because we don't put effort into helping them understand what their jobs are supposed to be. I've been dumped into that, where I've been dumped into middle management, and I was good at software engineering, and I could also write an email. And somehow that qualified me as middle management, and it didn't. I learned a lot of hard lessons that way, and yeah, hopefully I can help some other people not go through that. But anyways, I'm done for the week, or for the night. If you guys have anything else, don't go drink Starbucks. That's the word. That way, instead of unions, they'll just be jobless. Sorry, that was horrible. Anyways, have a fantastic week. And I hope you have a good week.